Ghana's Finance Minister, Ken Ofori Atta, says investing in education holds the key to equip Africans with the requisite skills needed to create jobs on the continent. CNBC Africa's Kenneth Igbomor caught up with him on the sidelines of the annual meetings of the African Development Bank in Busan, South Korea, to discuss this and more. Take a look.
I think one of the key things that we should never underplay is really the human spirit. So when we came in, we also abolished about 14 taxes. And it's difficult when you are doing fiscal consolidation to abolish taxes, meaning you are not getting revenue. But we believe that it will create the economic freedom and create the impetus for people to get into productive ventures and move away from the concept of taxation into production. And we saw the results. So you begin to ask yourself, how do I create economic freedom? How do I then stabilize the economy? And people will do much more than government is able to do. So I think there's a huge philosophical aspect to running an economy in which once it's people-centered, you are always pushing to create space for people's energies to be engaged. And that's how you sort of revive your economy. But more importantly, also getting people to think beyond gold, cocoa, and oil, and say that the power and energy of our human capital can create much more in terms of regenerating the economy than sometimes those things. And we see it in Korea, we see it in Singapore. I think Africa has not focused enough on that.
When you look at Ghana as an economy, you mentioned the cocoa, gold, and the commodities basically. When you look at how the urgency that is needed to drive value addition, so that we don't export raw materials out, where do you see the potential for Ghana's economy going if these things are really harder to?
I think, first of all, Ghana has obtained political stability 25 years in the Fourth Republic. We've changed governments about 2-3 times, and it has gone well. We are beginning to feel confident that we can manage the macro stability. Once you do that, then you begin to ask yourself, what is the best way to brand Ghana? And we say, well, why don't you brand yourself as really the regional hub? West Africans naturally like Ghana, so it can't be something that can be bottled and taken somewhere. How do you capitalize on it? You have this giant of a brother, Nigeria, on your side. What is it that they need that you can do better from your country? So how do you sell yourself to the world? We are going to be the hub. Let's have education. Let's have medical tourism. Let's have petroleum hub. Let's have a logistics and airport control. And I think that offers, and for us to be thought of as an innovation, center in the sub-region. That then diversifies your economy and gives you an unlimited potential. And I believe that's what we should be looking at to sustain it.
Okay, I'd just like to look now into the budget. We're seeing a new budget, financing basically. We're seeing you recently tapped into the Eurobond market recently, and then we're seeing from the revenue side of government, oil is doing, in fact, it's shaking up the mix. I'd like you to speak to this point.
We went to the Eurobond market this year. We didn't go last year because the economy was not that great, and we wanted the market to begin to look at the competence of the new government. And so we did. Fortunately for us, even in a very turbulent market because of the situation in Turkey and Argentina and the Iran deal, it was a difficult moment. However, the turnaround story of Ghana got through to investors. So in our bid to raise 1.5 billion, we got investor interest of $8 billion. More significantly, we also extended our yield curve to 30 years for the first time, which will help us later with regards to the mortgage and real estate industry in the country. And for a B rating sovereign at 7.625 for the 10-year was the best that we have seen in that category. and the best that we have obtained in the country. So that's good. But I think, one of the key issues, even as you build the economy, is something we call irreversibility. How do you give investors confidence that the gains that you're obtaining, another government will not come and roll it back? And so we are putting together what we call a fiscal rule that the deficit can't go beyond 5%. We have capped our statutory funds so that it cannot be used. We can't spend more than 25% of our revenue. We have an agreement with the central bank that they will not finance the government. And then, of course, as you know, our government, the vision of our president, Nana Akufo-Addo, is a Ghana beyond aid and Africa beyond aid. And what does that mean? Essentially saying, how do you create a self-confident people who are prosperous and gives opportunity for all and leverage off on your resources in a more effective way than we have done in the past. So we are creating something that we call a wise society, which is wealthy, inclusive, sustainable, and empowering. And around that is then going to be a national consensus on exactly the direction going forward, so that the irreversibility will be further stamped.
Interesting acronym there, the WISE initiative. I would like to speak to the level of debt right now in Ghana and also the wider Africa. Ghana is about 60%, debt to the GDP ratio is about 60% of I'd like to speak to that and then look at debt in Africa and how we can.
Yeah, it's we started last January with 73% debt to GDP ratio, which is really high distress. We've been able to bring it down to 69%. We're going to have what you call a rebasing, which hopefully will lead to an even lower debt to GDP ratio. But what is really important is your ability to service that debt, and whether the economy is expanding or you have a domestic revenue mobilization strategy, which is bringing in more revenue to be able to support that. And I think really that's what you should watch. So if you look at maybe Nigeria, you would say that your debt is really very low at 30% or so to GDP, if not lower. However, if your revenue is also very low, then it means you are spending so much of your revenue on debt, and therefore, that creates a problem. So I think for most of my peer finance ministers on the continent, the challenge now is how do we enhance our revenue mobilization, and this is where technology is going to be very important for that. And Ghana has moved into that arena in terms of digitalizing, beginning to have a national ID system that is biometric, and beginning to digitalize a lot of the work we do, such as paperless support services, etc. And that would enable us, maybe with some blockchain technology, begin to have data analytics that makes me know that Ken here bought a plane ticket, registered a car, so he has to file taxes. And that then becomes a way in which you draw the informal market to the formal, and for all of us to contribute resources towards the public services that we all need.
Interesting. I'd like you to speak to the importance of aligning fiscal and monetary policies, especially as it relates to Ghana.
Yeah, and I mean the central bank, of course, is autonomous, as is also in Nigeria and in most places, and we have gone further to agree on a zero financing from the central bank. So that enables them to focus on their inflation targeting, etc., and not be as activists in the market as we are. And then we keep to the fiscal. How do we budget? How do we get revenue? And how do we make sure that we don't overspend, which then creates the instabilities that we typically experience in Africa.
Okay. As we leave Busan, interesting conversations we've heard, I would like to look at your work with the African Development Bank, how you think that collaboration can go further and to spur more industries in Ghana.
The Africa Development Bank is really crucial and central to the development of the continent. And that is because it's so difficult for individual countries to be able to negotiate with the stronger Western countries. So it will act as a great buffer to that. We also have some major issues such as illicit financial flows, about 50 to whatever 100 billion a year out of the continent. We need to be able to negotiate that away. Those are resources that belong to us that we must harness. And I think an Africa Development Bank brings the confidence and boldness, for the smaller countries to do that. You can also see the Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is then going to create one zone. So you don't have various companies from the Western countries negotiating different things which are inimical to us. You compare yourself to India, for example, maybe the same population, the same GDP to a certain extent, but we have 107 borders to contend with, and they have one, or is it 4 with Bangladesh and co. And those are all externalities that create inefficiency, and that's not really inure to the confidence and prosperity of the people, the dignity of the people. There's so much in borders. So going forward with ADB, I think the finance ministers need to stand with them, and we need to confront some Pan-African issues, illicit financial flows, unbalanced contracts, tax erosion, etc. And I think we're going to go forward. I think we are also living with a certain commonality that people matter and we have to invest in them, that digitalization is important because the fourth industrial revolution is here with us. How do we support all countries to do that? How do we support ourselves with regards to domestic revenue mobilization? And we'll be able to have the resources to push on with the high fives, as President Adesina so eloquently tells us.
All right, finally, before I let you go, I just want to get a quick one, a projection for the economy, for Ghana's economy this year, and then how do you plan to translate that economic growth into jobs for the young people?
Predicting where the economy will go, that one will be only God. So we don't know. Because clearly, last year it was impossible to think that you get to 8.5. But in the end, and I think we will do well this year because we are going to continue to be disciplined about it. But I think you raise the right question. How do we translate that into sustainable jobs? We are intervening as a government of what we call the Nation Builders Corps, which is going to hire 100,000 people for 3 years, and also during the period train them so that they will be able to become entrepreneurs. But that's not what government wants to do or can do in a sustainable way. And so if I'm able to stabilize the macro, then I need some liquidity into the banks, and I need to support my venture capital companies. That then creates space for the teeming population to be able to know that the banking system is working for them. And I think we will be able to do it because when you see the penetration of the mobile architecture, and you see how now in China through mobile you can get credit, to do your business within 24 hours because there's data analytics. I suspect that by the end of next year, you are going to see our capacity to use blockchain technology, data analytics, for you to then to be able to access credit in a much faster way. And that then will spur the youth to do what they do best.
That was Ghana's Finance Minister, Ken Ofori Atta.